Welcome to Neurology 101 lesson. You can find this on pages 152 and 153 of your Nurse Workbook 2.0. And the purpose of these lessons is to give you real-world nursing education beyond the Nurse Workbook alone. So in this neurology module, we're about to cover a whole bunch of neurological conditions, what we do when we have head injuries, and how we treat them. And the most important part of this and our whole neurology assessment that you can also find in our assessment lessons is that the earlier we can detect head trauma or any kind of head injury, the better outcome we can always have for our patients. So like every module we start, we're going to start with our neurology anatomy. Our brain, or our cerebrum, is divided into a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. And both hemispheres make this cerebrum. So our left side of the brain is responsible for our logical reasoning, analytic skills, and language processing, while our right side is more involved with our creativity, intuition, and our spatial awareness. But the interesting thing about these hemispheres is that whatever side a brain has an injury or dysfunction, the opposite side of the body is going to be affected. So if I have an injury to the left side of my brain, this is going to affect the right side of my body. And this is because of our nerves that cross halfway in the medulla oblongata. And our medulla oblongata is a structure in the brainstem that is a bridge that connects our brain to our spinal cord. But our brain also has many lobes that are responsible for our daily life functions. So we're gonna learn more about these lobes. As a side note, while we're going through these lobes, we're going to see that one hemisphere and we're gonna talk about where these lobes are. But remember that what you're seeing on one hemisphere is also on the other hemisphere. So these four main lobes that we cover are on both sides. First, we want to look at our temporal lobes, and these are involved in processing our auditory information from our ears, such as our speech and hearing, and it plays a key role in forming our memories as well as emotional regulation. Our frontal lobes are located in the front of the brain, and they are responsible for higher cognitive functions, such as our decision-making, our personality, memory and rationality. It also contains the motor cortex, and this controls voluntary muscle movements, so our motor skills and our behavior, along with language, social and sexual and emotional regulation. The parietal lobes are located behind the frontal lobe and above the occipital lobe. And the parietal lobes process our sensory information it receives from the outside world. So this is like our body sensations, our spatial awareness, things like our touch, temperature, and pain. The occipital lobe is sitting at the back of the brain, and its main job is visual processing. So this means it's not just helping us see things, it's helping us interpret visual information. So when you look at something blue, you're processing that you're seeing blue. If you're looking at a laptop, you're processing you're seeing a laptop. And it's also helping with that spatial awareness too, knowing my laptop is about 1.5 feet away from me, and my couch is also about 5 feet away from me. As we move on from these four lobes, we want to note that this is no longer a part of the left and the right sides, and these are centralized in our lower brain. So our cerebellum is located directly under the occipital lobes at the back of the brain, and this is responsible for motor control, our coordination, precision, and accurate timing of our movements. It also plays a key role in cognitive functions like our attention, our language, and regulating fear and pleasure responses. We have our brainstem, and this is what connects the brain to the spinal cord. And its fundamental jobs are to maintain basic life functions, such as our breathing, our heart rate, blood pressure, temperature. And it also helps mediate our general alertness and regulate our sleep-wake cycles. And this little star right here is representing our 4 ventricles. So these ventricles are interconnected and they produce and circulate cerebral spinal fluid, also known as our CSF. These ventricles act like a cushioning system that protect the brain from injury, but they're also managing our brain's chemical environment. And our CSF, or cerebral spinal fluid, is a clear, colorless body fluid that's found in the brain and the spinal cord. So this is cushioning our brain within the skull, and it serves as a shock absorber to protect the central nervous system. And our CSF also removes waste products from the brain, and it distributes nutrients and chemicals filtered from the blood. So we looked at this macro picture of our brain, but our brain being connected to our spinal cord is what helps us process all these messages that we're getting from our hands to our feet, our legs, our temperature, and everything around us. It's how we're navigating through our world every single day. So we're gonna go into a micro level, and we're going to look at our neurons. So our neurons act like the grand transmitters that are helping send this information up to our brain. So we're going to talk about this neuron anatomy, but we're going to do this in the direction of impulse, meaning the circuit of how it's receiving messages and how it's going to send these messages along. So our neuron has these communicators called our dendrites. And our dendrites are these tree-like extensions at the beginning of the neuron that receive signals from other neurons or sensory stimuli. So they transmit electrical stimulation to the cell body. So these dendrites basically are determining what kind of activation level they want to give to the rest of this neuron. So basically, how quickly should we be sending this message? So if we're to touch something hot, then we want to pull away quickly, or dendrites are going to speed up this message or give the message to speed it up so that way we remove our hand. But if my hand touches this table, our dendrites are saying, hey, this is a soft table, we're okay here, and it's totally fine. And it's moving these messages along at lightning speed, but not as quick as it were by the feedback of touching something hot. And then we have our cell body, or this is also called a soma, and this acts as the neuron's metabolic center. It houses the nucleus, which contains our neuron's DNA, and various organelles that are critical for its function. So this part of the neuron integrates signals that's received from the dendrites. If these signals are strong enough, the cell body is going to help initiate an action potential. So an action potential is a rapid change in the ions across the neuron membrane. So it's working with these dendrites to determine how fast do we need to ramp up this message that goes back to touching something hot or touching a smooth table. So it's basically working together to figure out, hey, we got to tell the brain really quick to pull this hand away, or it's saying, we're good here, everything's fine, and we can just kind of go the normal pace. So our axon is a long, slender projection that conducts electrical impulses away from the neuron cell body. And it functions as the transmission line of the neuron that carries the action potential to its end. So wrapping around this axon is the myelin sheath. So this is a fatty layer that envelopes the axon of many neurons, and this provides electrical insulation, and it helps increase the speed of impulse of transmission along the axon. So the myelin sheath is vital for rapid and efficient signal conduction. If you've ever heard of multiple sclerosis or MS, this is actually where we see this condition. So unfortunately, in someone with MS, their autoimmune system is attacking the myelin sheath and breaking it down. And as you can imagine, this is going to significantly affect these neurons. And in between these myelin sheaths and this axon are known as these gaps. And these are known as the nodes of Ranvier. So they're important for rapid signal transmission. So these nodes allow our ions to flow across the membrane and the action potential to actually jump from node to node or gap to gap in a process called saltatory conduction. So we can think of this almost like skipping stones across the pond. So when you huck the stone, you'll see it jump across the water and it goes super fast. If you were to just throw it and try to skid the stone on the surface, it's going to lose that traction and it's going to take longer to get from point A to point B. But when we throw it and it jumps and skips, it's actually cruising a lot faster. So we have the same process going on here. So here we can see the direction of impulse. So remember, this starts from the dendrites and it's going to the end here of our neuron. And we can see our synapse is here at the end right before the axon terminal. So the axon terminal is this endpoint of our axon where our neurotransmitters are released into the synapse. So this is actually converting the electrical signal of the action potential into a chemical signal that can cross this synapse to our next neuron. So the synapse is the junction between two neurons or between a neuron and a target cell like a muscle cell. So this is where communication occurs by these neurotransmitters. And if you look here in this picture, you can see up here at our dendrites, it's connecting to our synapse and our axon terminal. And all of this is happening lightning fast. So those dendrites are putting their feelers out, they're picking up the impulse, giving it to the cell body, traveling down that axon, which changes into a chemical signal to the synapse, and the next dendrites are picking that up. And all of these impulses and messages are sent in lightning speed. This concludes our Neurology 101 and Anatomy lesson. I will see you in the next one.